Okay, thank you. So today we're talking about how to prepare images to make your website faster. And this is important because when a when you get an analysis on your web page and you look at the things that may be slowing your website down, beyond the hosting environment itself or outside of the hosting environment itself, it's not the number of plugins that you have on your website. It's not how much text you have on your website. It's not how long the page is. The thing that is the biggest factor that may make your website load slower are images. Images are exponentially larger file size than like a quantity of text. In other words, you don't have to worry about how long the page is from the text perspective, but you do need to worry, are your images as optimized as possible? Are they as small as possible? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. All right, okay, so we are going to be, I think you can, let me minimize my window here. We're going to be talking about we're going to look at some traditional formats between JPEG, PNG, and GIF, as well as next-gen formats like JPEG 2000, JPEG XR, WebP, and SVG. Okay, so actually, before I even get started, I forgot. Let me, if I may, real quick, may I open it up to you real quick and ask you real quick for feedback on kind of what you're hoping to learn today, and like what, if anyone would like to share your experience of using images for web, I would be curious to get some feedback so I can make sure to touch on those points.
Yeah, I'm a UX designer, and I am not necessarily a web developer. So the more ninja I can be about anything I provide to anybody, or anything that anybody provides to me, the smaller and easier and better it can be. Awesome. So
Great.
that's me.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Right, Chris here. I had a couple of, I have my own website and do social media, marketing automation campaigns, and always looking for ways to improve the image downloading speed and web speed. But my questions are also specifically related around WordPress. As I understand it, it used to be when you'd upload an image to WordPress, it would save it in a bazillion different sizes for you in your template. Also, when you're working in Photoshop, they used to have where you could save it for social sizes. And so, obviously size and dimensions are things that I'm interested in learning more about in terms of these new formats, and in terms of how that works within the WordPress platform, and also within HubSpot, Salesforce, some of the other marketing automation platforms.
Great, yes, thank you for that. And WordPress does have some great plugins and some functionality that really make a difference in here. So I will mention about that as we go. Yes, okay. All right, great. Now to continue. So the first one we're going to be looking at here right now, what we're looking at here is like when to use which item. So, okay, a JPEG. A JPEG is very, very common. It's widely supported. And one reason to use a JPEG is that it's very safe. In other words, you won't have any problem with browser compatibility, any problem with device compatibility, and the quality of the image can still look good, much better than, say, for example, a GIF. And it can be large, it can be small. It's a very, very common image format. But it can be a big file size in some of the next-gen image formats. And so we need to be careful about how we use it. JPEGs are really popular, and and they are, even to this day, they're still very commonly used on the websites, but they need to be compressed. So a JPEG is good for if you have a photograph like this with many different colors and with gradients, like we have like from the pink to the blue and the yellow to the green. A JPEG is very good for this, whereas a GIF is not. The reason is because a JPEG supports millions of colors, where a GIF does not. And so it's really good with photographs and or anything like still images with lots of different colors. A PNG, on the other hand, a PNG is also very good or it's also becoming more and more popular. This is kind of a newer technology than a JPEG. It's not as supported as much as a JPEG is, but PNGs are very popular, and they are really good for line art. So this example here is a picture of like a line art. So like there's distinct lines. There's some black lines and some white lines. A JPEG is really good for, I'm sorry, a PNG is really good for this. And you can also use PNG for these beautiful, colorful images like this. But a PNG, the way it works is that it will create a larger file size. So I recommend using PNG when you have a line art, a file that is a line art and not many colors. One good thing about both JPEGs and PNGs is that you can export them from almost any image editing software, such as Photoshop. By the way, what image editing softwares do you guys use? If anyone would like to share, Photoshop, Sketch, anything like that?
Yep, Sketch and Photoshop.
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay, I use primarily Photoshop, and so yeah, PNGs you can export that, and from many other image editing tools you can export PNG. I do recommend PNG for logos. Logos and line art is really great. Okay, the next one is a GIF. I would say the GIF is an old format, and the GIF that used to be kind of like a good one to use for logos as well too. But there is one big problem with GIFs. GIFs have a limited color palette of only 256 colors. This cool animation here, right here, it looks cool, it looks nice, but that's because it's not a colorful photo. If we had if we took this picture here of this nice sunset and made it into a GIF, it would look really bad because there's only 256 colors available to use in any GIF. And so that a JPEG or a picture like this would look really bad. Now, of course, the one really cool thing about a GIF is that you can do animation. And so GIFs are very popular, even like on like chat programs like WhatsApp and Facebook. And you can so GIFs are kind of nice, but GIFs can be very heavy. And so here's my personal practice. When I'm creating a logo, I always save it as a PNG and not a GIF. Like I don't use GIFs anymore. And basically I would never, and I never even really recommend it. I mean, unless you're specifically using something that requires a GIF, like maybe like during like a WhatsApp conversation, or maybe like a Facebook Messenger chat. Maybe that might be a time where you can only use an animated GIF if you want to use animated item. But otherwise, I never recommend using GIF. I recommend using either JPEG photographs and PNGs for logos and line art. By the way, something else here about PNGs is that PNGs do support transparency. JPEGs do not. This is actually very important when you are creating like a logo for your website. It is always better to create a logo with a PNG transparent background. The reason is because if you tried to put that same, let's say your website is blue and you created a logo. Well, we'll even take this example here. There's a black logo, and then your website background is blue. You could take this logo here and you could put it on your website background, and it would look very nice. You would see the blue behind it and the black logo. But let's say though, for example, like you had like another inner page that was there where the background color was red, and you wanted to use the same logo. If you're using this transparent PNG, then you can achieve that effect seamlessly with no problems. However, if you were made this as a JPEG, then JPEGs do not support transparency. So when you're creating this, you would have been forced to create a blue background on this logo. But then that means that you can't use this same logo on your red page because it wouldn't work. But if you did create this as a PNG, you can use it. So let me pause for a moment and ask, are there any questions about these three popular these three popular formats, JPEG, PNG, and GIFs? Before we get into any more fancier and newer formats, I just want to make it real clear about when you should use which. Does anyone have any questions on when you should use which format for these three?
Very helpful and clear description.
Good.
What about for when you're wanting it to be for responsive design for mobile? Is there any particular format that you would choose over another, or is it more about the color, transparency?
Yeah, great question. So if we are limited to just these three options, and for right now, that is all we're talking about. We're not talking about the next gen things yet. So when it comes to just these three options, JPEG, PNG, or GIF, there is not any difference of using which format or by choosing which format, depending on the device or screen size you're using. However, though, the number of images you may make in the different sizes, that might change. So let me try to make that a little bit more clear. If you created so you have a logo, like this light bulb here, you have a desktop site and you have your mobile site, or just a responsive site that is responsive on mobile devices. The question is, should you consider using like a PNG for one and a JPEG the other? The answer is no, because the way that these image file formats work is that they work the same in all these different devices. So transparent PNG is going to be the best thing for logos on your big desktop website and on your small mobile device. And the same is true about a JPEG. If you have a photograph or something with many different colors in it, especially gradients, then you should use a JPEG on your desktop version and on your responsive version. So the image format doesn't change. The recommended image format doesn't change depending on the screen size or the device. Notice I didn't even mention the GIF because in my opinion, as I said earlier, that is no longer usually, most often, you can't achieve a smaller size in GIF really, or it's so negligible that I just don't even consider GIF anymore. For me, it's just either JPEG or PNG, at least when it comes to the traditional formats. And it doesn't matter on the device. Great question. I like that. That was a really good one. Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I got a question, and if it's totally a different topic or subject, that's fine. Does the same kind of thing, since I am potentially going to be designing apps and things like that, anything that's native, this kind of doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's also, yeah, it would my same answer would also apply to this one, is that even an app, you're going to still use a mix maybe of JPEGs and PNGs. Yeah. Because it's just like the way that, and by the way, one other thing I should explain, just to make it clear, if you were to kind of save okay, so one thing I can't do with JPEGs, I can't have transparent backgrounds. So, but okay, so let's say that, for example, that was not needed. Say I didn't even need a transparent background. Then the next question is okay, should I use a JPEG or PNG, because I can do both. And typically, the way just the format file itself works is that PNGs can be smaller than file size. I should say smaller in file size than a JPEG when it comes to just solid colors, line art type colors. And the converse is true about JPEGs. If you have something with many colors, it's not that JPEGs can't support many colors. I could create a JPEG, or I'm sorry, I didn't mean this. It's not that PNGs don't support many colors, because they do. PNGs, I could export this as a PNG. The difference, though, is just that the way the file format itself works is that JPEGs can be a smaller file size while maintaining higher quality than a PNG would of that same type of photo. Okay, good. Yeah, good questions. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some next-gen file formats here. And JPEG 2000 is one. We're going to be looking at 3 of them. JPEG 2000, JPEG XR, and WebP. Or it's spelled WebP, but they pronounce it Webby. Okay, JPEG 2000. Now all of these formats, the purpose of them, the reason why they're invented, basically, is to try to allow the photo to remain a high quality, but even a lower file size. So that's always the goal. And all 3 of these formats do achieve that goal. JPEG 2000, JPEG XR, and WebP, they can all create photos like this JPEG, like this nature scene here, with high quality and a lower file size than just traditional JPEG. However, there are some really big roadblocks to using these. For one, JPEG 2000 is only supported by Safari browser or Safari related browsers. It's basically an initiative by Apple to create the next version of JPEG. The problem, though, is that it's not compatible all across the board with many different devices. So it is a better file format, a smaller size, but it's not as compatible. And the same thing is true about JPEG XR. JPEG XR is Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge's version of making a more advanced JPEG. And it worked. They did it. They accomplished their goal. But the problem, though, is that it also has some problems with device or browser compatibility. And lastly, the WebP as well. The WebP, same situation, unfortunately. So the WebP was developed by Google, or at least projects related to Google. So it's a very good option. And actually, of these 3 options, WebP is becoming the most popular because Google Chrome itself is the most popular browser. But you know what? Not even Safari supports WebP. So what we have here is we have these great new next-gen image formats like JPEG 2000, JPEG XR, and WebP. But the problem, though, is that there's 2 actually big problems. One is device compatibility, or browser compatibility. It can be sketchy for some of them. But 2, the other thing about it is that some software, it's not as easy to export like a WebP. Like, for example, I'm a Photoshop user. I can easily export a JPEG, PNG, or GIF, even animated GIFs, or I could do that in Photoshop very easily. Now, there may be some plugins, or maybe, and actually, to be honest, it's possible too that Photoshop, just even since I last checked, maybe they do support exporting directly into WebP from Photoshop, but I don't know that. Does anyone else know that? And would anyone else like to talk about exporting maybe WebP from Sketch or something that I'm not as familiar with? Okay, so yeah, so WebP is fantastic it's really cool, like in regards to the quality and with low file size. It's definitely better than a traditional JPEG. But the problem is that well, the two things I just mentioned. Also, one other thing about WebP too is the WebP is good. Also, the way that it works, it can also be used for line art. So in the past, or traditional, or even like right now, you know, as I said, JPEGs are great for mini colors and gradients, and PNGs are great for line arts and logos. Well, WebP actually kind of eliminates the need for both of them, because the way WebP works is that it can support both well. So with WebP, you could do both PNGs and JPEGs. Or sorry, with WebP, you could do both line art, logos, and mini colored gradient photos, and it would look really good. So, okay, let me tell you real quick. I want to tell you about how to use WebP if you did want to. If you did want to start incorporating WebP into your workflow. And basically it's like this. First of all, what you should do, you would create the JPEG image or the PNG in your Photoshop tool or Sketch or an image processing tool of choice. And then you could use like a third-party tool to convert it. So I believe I have this over here. Let me get the site.
I found a link that looks like Sketch supports WebP.
Okay, yeah, good. Yeah, great. And maybe Photoshop does these days too. It's very possible. But so let's say, like, for example, here I have a picture and I want to, and I export it as a JPEG, but let's say I want to export it as a WebP, I can just click and upload it, and I can hear in this process too. And what it does is it automatically downloads that for me here. So I did that, and it automatically put that new one. In fact, actually, let me see if I can. Okay, let me do that here. Here. I'm going to compare these. Okay, my original JPEG was 161 kilobytes. This new WebP is now 140 kilobytes. So it did reduce the file size. So, okay, so that's how you can create some WebPs. All right, and then what you could do is you could then incorporate that into your workflow. And the way, or into your actual images. Did anyone have a question right there? Thought I may have heard something.
I was just wondering if going from 160 to 141 in kilobytes, would that justify adding it to your workflow, do you think? I suppose if you had thousands and thousands of images, yes, but what do you think?
Yeah, I do think that's a great question. And I actually, what you said is probably accurate. You know, if you have many, many images on many different pages and your website is big enough, it may be something to consider. And but however, I also recommend just doing some tests. There are some ways to compress even your JPEG images, and we'll take a look at that here in just a second as well too. So so let's actually come back to that a little bit.
Yep.
Okay, now what we're going to talk about is SVG. SVG is very cool. Has anyone used SVG before?
No.
Okay, so an SVG is different than all these other ones that I've talked about so far. You know, I talked about JPEGs, PNGs, GIFs, WebPs, and then some of the other ones. But SVG is totally different. SVG it uses vector points. So people who are familiar with the difference between Photoshop and Illustrator, for example, will really understand this. Photoshop and Sketch are great for manipulating photos of millions of pixels, where every single pixel is like has a certain color value. And Photoshop is great for that. That's what it was first built for. And Illustrator, though, is different. Adobe Illustrator was built to create vector-based graphics. And here in this image here, excuse me, we see some examples of vectors. In a vector-based graphic, it uses mathematical points. So we have like 1 point here, and then 1 point here, and then the curve is kind of represented by the extension from this anchor. So we have the anchor with the extension, and then that kind of creates this curve. If this extension wasn't here, then it would be a sharp angle. Then this point would be like a sharp angle to this point. And so that could help. Fred, actually, I think you might have a little feedback coming in. Would it be possible to mute? I think, okay. So, I don't know, Fred, are you there? Did you hear that? I'm not sure. Alex, are you able to mute, or maybe I could even mute Fred here. Hold on, sorry. One quick. Let me try to see if I can mute him. Okay. Got it. Okay. Good. Can everyone else still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, sounds much better now. Okay, so SVGs are great, and one of the reasons what makes SVGs so great is because the amount of data that's needed to save an SVG file is very, very small. So the problem, though, with SVG, as you can maybe imagine, is that it doesn't do photographs with many different colors. So SVG is like a great alternative to like a logo. So instead of creating like a logo as a PNG, you could create your logo as an SVG. Now, one of the difficulties maybe SVG is that it's a little bit harder to use and to even implement than like a PNG. Because for example, like in Photoshop, I can just export a PNG directly from my tool and then throw it on the website just as if it was like a JPEG, and it's very easy. SVG, it's a little bit more difficult. And so there is that little kind of barrier to using SVGs, but there are some ways to do that. And I won't go into great detail right now about how to export and put a SVG on your website. That might be a topic for like another event, but basically SVGs are, and the good thing about SVGs too is wide. Well, I noticed here in my notes here I have limited browser support. It is wider browser support than some of these things. And so what you could do is create like a fallback if you need to, but it's a really, if you're looking for like, if you have a line art and you need the fastest solution, SVG is it. And you can create some fallbacks if you want. Okay, feel free to ask a question if anyone has any, otherwise I'm just gonna go on.
So I do have a quick question.
Yes.
It's about the WebP files though. I forgot to ask previously, but I'm not having issues with creating the file. We're more having issues with not seeing the file supported by WordPress. Is that something that you're familiar with?
So when you maybe because you're not using Chrome when you're looking in WordPress, or like
no,
what does it
using
mean?
Chrome.
What when you say like it's not supported by WordPress, what is the actual experience that you have?
So you know, I'll go into WordPress and upload new files, and it doesn't even show as like a file available to upload along with the other images that I have that are in the same spot.
Oh, interesting. You know, I'm not sure, but actually I'm happy to look into this afterwards. You can reach out to me, and I'm curious, you know, we use WordPress a lot too. And so we can try to connect after this and see if we can see what the problem is. I'd be curious to dig into that deeper myself.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, now we're going to talk about, did someone else have a question?
I had a question on the
Yes.
SVG.
Uh-huh.
I tried to make a vector of my logo for Facebook, and I made it in an SVG, and it looked awful.
Yeah.
So I ended up going with a PNG. What was I doing wrong?
So it's possible that, okay, so when companies like Facebook, like when you upload your photos to their applications, they manipulate them. So they are, and this is no matter what the image is, if it's like a JPEG, a PNG, or whatever, if a person uploads a photograph to those tools, to those platforms, they're going to run some compression on them to make them smaller, because they have so many people uploading so many photos, and sometimes they're just huge, ridiculously huge, because people don't know how to scale them or compress them correctly. So they just go ahead and take the initiative to do that. So my guess is that it's possible that Facebook maybe just doesn't really even offer support for SVGs. Do you know if they do? Do they claim that they offer support for SVGs?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that either, but it sounds to me like what happens is like that. My guess is that you exported your SVG correctly, but then when you import it into Facebook, Facebook ran its processing on it, which basically ruined it. That's my guess. And so I'm not aware of Facebook supporting SVGs, but again, this is kind of something that we could follow up with. You can follow up with me after the meeting. I am curious to know, and that may explain it though. So yeah, in the meantime, you might just have to use PNGs.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Now we're going to talk about something about how to make responsive images. Okay, so this gets into something really cool. There are ways to make an image have different. You actually use different images for different display size. So there's a difference between a natural size and a display size. A display size is how big the image actually appears on your browser, on your device. And the natural size is just how big that is. Like you could have a natural size of 2,000 pixels wide by 2,000 pixels, but you can have a display size of only 200 pixels. What that means is that you have like a really big image that's being manual or manipulated by your browser or using CSS, whatever, to display it within 200 pixels. That is really bad when it comes to if you're trying to do really good for performance, because you're basically loading way more image than what you need. Now the problem though is that there are images that or these days when we build a website, we have to make responsive websites, so we always need the images to be responsive. Sometimes we need one image we need the same image to appear on a big browsers like 2,000 pixels wide, and to appear on small phones in maybe 200 pixels wide. So what do we do for this? Well, in the past, we just used to kind of use the same image. And then what that means though, is that these mobile users are having to download these horrifically big images that they don't even need. So one thing that was invented to help with this is called the source set tag. And you could just add it into your normal image tag. So for example, you have like your open bracket, your IMG, this is for the image. And then you notice too, from your traditional HTML, you have the source equals, and then you have like your WordPress image, and then you're in, and that's all fine. But they invented now this source set attribute where you can actually have different images depending on what size you need. So this is actually for image density. Different monitors have different pixel densities to them. So like an Apple Retina device has at least 2 times more pixel density than a traditional monitor. And nowadays too, we have I think devices up to 4 times. In my opinion, I don't think that we will have, or that we even need, monitors, and this includes TVs as well, that are greater than 4 times the image density, because the human eye can't notice that. I could be wrong, but that's from, if I recall correctly. But anyway, you do have a range though between 1 and 4. 1 is your traditional monitor, and then 2 might be some at least early style Retina devices, and then maybe even here. And this actually includes some cell phones now too these days. You may have higher pixel density. So if you had, this is actually the number, it refers to the number of pixels per the space. And these, a Retina device has more pixels per the space, the actual physical space of the device. What that means though is that like it's kind of interesting actually. It's with the progress of monitors that we have, both in cell phones and all the way up to TVs, with the progress that we have in getting even more and more dense pixels, it actually is causing a problem for designers like us, because we actually have to make our photographs bigger and better quality. But what that means, like bigger and bigger file size and heavier. And so it's kind of like, it's an interesting paradox. We're getting better quality photographs, and yet at the same time too, exactly because things are going, these devices are getting so big, we have to be able to make them in a, we have to increase the file size. But so there is a way to do that. With this source set responsiveness, we can actually have several versions of an image. So here's like our default. Then we have one that's 2 times as big for Retina devices, one that's 3 times as big for other devices, and 4 times as big. And the browser is smart enough to only load the one that it needs. I'm going to give you one other example, and then I'm going to take some questions about source set responsiveness. Actually, okay, so here, there's one other example here that I have. This is actually measuring the width, the display width. This is really important. Again, like a lot of our websites these days, they need to be built for large desktop monitors or even TV screens, whatever, all the way down to small cell phones. How do we do that with the same image? Well, technically what we're doing, we make various versions of that image, and then we display that image based on the width of the display. So for example, we have our fallback image here of the flamingo. Then we have for widths of 1006 pixels wide, show this version. But though it's not going to display the images that are bigger. But on the other hand, if the display area is 3019 pixels wide, then it's going to use this version that's 3 times bigger. This is really, really good news. It's really good news for mobile developers or anyone with a mobile website or a responsive website. Because what this means is that when someone downloads your images, they don't have to download the same images that you send to your desktop. Instead, they're downloading down to small ones. Now, this does get into a lot of coding, and some people just may not like that. The good news is that WordPress, for example, does support this. And in fact, it actually supports this natively. Now, with WordPress these days, whenever you upload an image to WordPress, it automatically is creating various versions of that. It's creating their really, really small versions all the way, and then several iterations. You can even control which iterations it makes at which breakpoints. But it's creating all that, and it's going to add in that source set code for you. And so this is really cool. It's great news for people who just don't want to get into coding. For people who do want to get into coding, though, you do actually have the ability to create lots of, to manipulate this as you want. You can have a lot of control over this and get things exactly the way you want. So source set can be very confusing and intimidating, especially for non-developers. But let me take some questions now. Any questions about source set?
Ryan, this is Joel. I had a question in general, and feel free to either answer this now or maybe save it. It may be coming. What I'm looking for is really kind of the basics. I've got content all over the places and images that are in different sizes. And so I'm just trying to really just gather that in a library or repository and just kind of do the basics in terms of image sizing. What would you advise just to kind of get kind of this 101 phase 1 crawl challenge done?
Oh, you know what? I have a really good answer for you. Is your website on WordPress? Let me start there.
It is now, but we're going to move to Shopify.
Okay, no problem. Here's what I would do, and I'll address this first as a WordPress user, and then we can go from there. There are some tools that can compress all of the images in your library all at once. And I think this is kind of what you're talking about. You're saying like, okay, I have this history. I have this website with lots of images. You know, I can't go back in and add this like code to the source set code to all of them, or I can't even make different. I can't change the format at this time. You know, I can't switch from JPEG to some other one, or you know, PNG or from GIF to PNG because it's just too much, and I can't change. I can't like swap some of these images out because it's just too big. Where do I go from here? There is actually an easy answer and a sure answer to what you should do. At the very minimum, what you should just do is find some tool to automatically compress all those images. WordPress, with WordPress, you can actually install some plugins, and it can do that within WordPress itself, where it just goes back and just compresses all those images automatically. And actually, I'll talk a little bit about that tool here in a little bit. One's called Kraken, and another is called Short Pixel, and that is coming up. And then there are some ways to do this outside of WordPress too. Like you could do this using just like a command console and interacting with some of these programs. But yeah, how does that help answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll kind of get into some of these tools here. Yeah. So first of all, okay, let's actually look at some of these testing tools now. So the two big ones that we use are Google PageSpeed Insights and GTmetrix. You may be familiar with both, only one of them. So I'm going to do right here just for this example, Google PageSpeed Insights. Would anyone like to volunteer their website?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
You could just do patrickjkeating.com, or if you want me to chat it.
I think I got it. How does that look?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so it's running its analysis. GTmetrix, by the way, is even more in depth. Well, they're kind of different. That we really do use both. They're both really good. Okay,
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's bad.
You know what? I got to tell you too, just to be honest, like it's hard to get a good score these days. Like there are so many different things. Like there are so many different factors. We do have some different meetups, and I will schedule some in the future about how to basically improve the performance of your website, because there are so many things to look at and to consider. By the way, too, is showing just mobile first, you probably have a better score on desktop. See, yeah, as I figured, this is actually kind of common. So anyways, it is very common to get a low score. Because there's just so many things to do, and you know, yeah, we can help with that. Well, we can talk more about that later, but yeah, desktop usually scores better on average than mobile. So let's look at this though. So one of the cool things about it is it's giving you screenshots of how the page loads over throttle, and really when like the bandwidth is throttle. And so this is kind of like the way, and this is actually a big factor into Google scoring. Like this right here is really big. It doesn't even matter, for example, like how big your total web page is, but what's more important to Google these days is, does it immediately start giving the user something? Does it immediately start at least showing signs of loading? Like this right here, this is where it's penalizing you primarily for, and not the total size. That's kind of like a, I mean, I think it's a fascinating science. You know, page speed insights is a fascinating science, getting into performance. And like, this is just kind of one of the interesting things about it. It's not even the total file size of the web page necessarily, but it's the user experience that they're grading on here. Okay, so anyway, serve images in Nextgen formats, it's saying. And let's see, efficiently encode images is one too here. And so this has to do with like the compression, the optimization of it. This is kind of saying use Nextgen formats here. So it wants, what Google PageSpeed Insights is encouraging people to use JPEG 2000, JPEG XR, and WebP. And so this is something like you could do. So, okay, for example, let's look at this one right here. You have a PNG here. I'm going to open this up here. And this is a great image. So this, though, would be better as a JPEG. The reason, PNG, see, I see that it's a PNG just by looking at the URL. So I see it's a PNG, which you can do, PNGs are allowed. They're very compatible across many devices and browsers, so you don't have to worry about that. But when it comes to many different colored images here, this should be a JPEG and not a PNG. So here I see a JPEG, yep, PNG. Okay, yeah, I see here you did a logo in as a PNG, and that is good. If you did the same logo in a JPEG, to get it, you would probably experience some, at the same file size you get as the JPEG, you'd get some ugly JPEG artifacts around the lines. So it's good that you made that a PNG there. So this one particular image right here, this is like really bad. I think that all these images here, they're doable. I mean, this is still high, 129 kilobytes, but a megabyte, 1.7 megabytes is very big. So there you go. Now kind of like you have like a really big offender right here. Just this one image right here is a big offender. Thank you, Patrick, for being willing to allow us to look at that. That was helpful for like a real life example. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes people just have like one or two big offenders, whereas other ones are doable. And so by looking at this, you can really see that. So great example. I really enjoyed that.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to talk about how to actually compress images. So there are many options actually. One, we use Short Pixel and Kraken a lot. The reason why we use this is because they have good WordPress plugins available. For one, I guess that's really the kind of main thing. So let me actually give you an example. Short Pixel and Kraken, they both allow you to manually upload, images to their website, and they compress them for you. So this is the Kraken's interface, kraken.io/web interface. So what you can do is you can actually upload images, and then it'll resize that. So just for the sake of time, because we are kind of coming up on the end of our hour here, let me walk you through real quick about what I did here. Here's my original file, a DNG. It's a really big photograph. It's like tens of megabytes big. And now I created one for the web using Photoshop. I saved it as a JPEG, and I saved it with I saved it with some compression. I didn't save it as 100%. I saved it with like a 70% compression compression when I was exporting it. Now, here's the big thing though that I want you guys to know from this. And I find this very intriguing, but so far, all of my tests confirm it is true. Photoshop cannot optimize photos while maintaining the quality as good as Kraken and Short Pixel. My mind is kind of blown by this, to be honest. I don't understand this. Photoshop should be better at this. For things like Sketch, I haven't tested. I don't know. But
same.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, isn't that amazing? How I just don't understand that these.
It's a little worse.
Sorry, say that again.
Just a little worse.
Yeah, it's like amazing that these software companies don't make this more of a priority. So anyway, because of that, though, because of this fact, what you always have to do, my workflow is like this. When I'm in Photoshop and I'm exporting it, I export it at like the lowest quality that I want. I mean, just for example, if I'm going to export and I do like an export as or something, and let me just do a real quick example here. If I am exporting that, then I can maybe change the JPEG quality here. Maybe I bring it down to like the quality that I want to, just for whatever, like 59%. I change the image width or whatever. I export that. And then here I have my photograph here. Now, what I do is I have to compress this even further. So I use like a tool like Kraken, and I just simply upload it into Kraken right here. I clicked and dragged it, and here we have, this is the original size. The original file size was 160 kilobytes. The new cracked file size is 111. So it actually, this got even smaller than the WebP. So this is actually pretty cool. The WebP was 140. The WebP was 140 kilobytes. This Kraken tool got it down to And let me actually, here, I can even say that in here so we can kind of compare the image quality as well. So actually, let me do it a different way here. Let me just click download here. So, okay, now here we have the, okay, the JPEG. By the way, let me put this side by side, the WebP, and sorry, I'm actually not using my computer. I'm using someone else's computer, so I'm a little unfamiliar with, I guess, their workflow here. Maybe try doing it this way here. See if that works. Okay. Oh, you know what? I will. Let me change. Oh well. Just for the sake of time, I guess maybe I'll skip this. But I was just going to compare the quality size, or the image. The quality will look the same. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Let me go back to. Let me go back to here, and okay. Let me tell you real quick about. There is an option between lossy and lossless. This is important. Lossy. If you choose lossy, it actually will compress the image and change like the file size, the actual pixels or the actual code, and it will slightly change the quality of the picture. If you want lossless, it won't change the quality of the pixel at all. It just optimizes the code of the actual file so that you don't get that. So lossless, you're not going to see quite as an improved conversion, but it also, you won't see any decrease in the quality of the photograph as well. So the great thing about these tools like Kraken though and Smart Pixel or Short Pixel, if you're using WordPress, you can install these plugins, and basically when you upload a file to WordPress, it'll automatically compress them for you. It literally sends it out in the back end. You don't even know it. It sends it out back to Short Pixel or Kraken, then sends the compressed one back, and it saves the compressed one in your WordPress media library. So it does it for you, so you don't have to manually do that each time. It's really nice.
Is there something similar for Shopify?
There might be. There might be, because this, though I don't know. That is a good question. How about, I do have another slide, but let me actually take any more questions. I am coming up near the end of my presentation. I was going to talk a little bit about video real quick, but before I do, and I was going to talk about CDNs. Does anyone have any question real quick, or should I just go on?
I do on videos.
Okay. Okay, well, talk about video real quick.
Okay.
I'm just going to talk fast, and feel free to ask your question. So, question, do we want to self-host our videos, or do we want to host with like a streaming platform like YouTube or Vimeo? And I would say that it depends on your needs. If sometimes people have they specifically don't want their video to live on YouTube or Vimeo, and for that reason you're forced to do either self-host or to not choose something as kind of popular as YouTube. The other thing is that maybe you want to avoid a domain lookup. Like when the HTTP page is running, you can actually avoid that domain lookup by not having something on a separate domain like YouTube. But then again, though, that might be worth it. The majority of videos that I see, I actually do recommend to host on YouTube or Vimeo and then just embed in your web page. I recommend that because YouTube is very good about browser compatibility and device compatibility, and very good with streaming options and low bandwidth. Like, for example, just as with images, you can have many different fallbacks. Size, the fallbacks with different size, fallbacks of images of different formats. The same is true with videos. And if you upload your video to YouTube, YouTube is doing that automatically for you behind the scenes. It's creating many different versions of your video file, and it will send the version then appropriate to every single device and bandwidth that is requesting it. It's really good for compatibility purposes. I like it. The only time where I would recommend, or that kind of we come across often, where we choose to self-host a video, is if your video really is just a really short video, and maybe it's and you can provide your own fallback in it, like a picture, like an image or something. So like if the video doesn't load, it just has like an image in the background. Those are, otherwise I recommend hosting on like another platform. Okay, what's your question? I don't hear you. I don't know if you're, yeah, there you go.
You answered it.
Okay, good, excellent,
Good.
great, thanks. Okay, real quick about CDNs.
Brian, can I ask a quick question about embedding videos on a WordPress site?
Yep.
Let's say you wanted to embed one like into on your home page. Is there a good way to do that without showing like all of the YouTube handles, so you can see like just the video?
Yes, there are YouTube and Vimeo both offer ways to remove the branding and remove the controls, and also ways to remove, you know how like after you watch a video, there'll be like recommended videos that show up next. You can remove that stuff too. All that is available. And some of that you can do for free without using like a pro account. Like for example, to remove the recommended videos, all you do is like when you embed the URL, you actually include just like a little variable at the end of it. This is like relative something 0. I don't remember the exact one.
Yeah.
And
okay,
then
to get like pro account.
Yeah, to get rid of like the branding though, some of the branding, yeah, you might need to get a pro account. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so using like a CDN like Cloudflare and Cloudinary, I recommend. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I don't have time to go into CDNs. I think that will be like on the next one where I talk about performance, just how to increase your overall website performance. Maybe when we kind of focus more on that, just in general, we'll talk more about CDNs. But CDNs, they also have services that are available that kind of like Short Pixel and Kraken, that they can actually optimize your image for you on the fly. You don't have to manually do it. So there are some options like that. It's real nice. Here on my slides here, I'm actually going to put a copy of the slides. Give me, actually, I forgot to do it before the event, so don't go to this link just yet. But within 1 hour, if you go to this link, ghat.ws/slides, you can get a copy of these slides and have them. So check in just an hour at that. Can I take any questions in before we end?
For my Webby issue with WordPress, is that something that I can email you about?
Yeah, sure. Yes. Feel free to email me. I'm glad to take a look at it.
What is your email?
Ryan@greenhatwebs.com. And I do believe I actually have that here on the.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Ryan@greenhatwebs, plural, WEBS.com. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming out and joining our webinar. I really appreciate it. Oh, come back again May 20th. If you haven't signed up already, we are on meetup.com, meetup.com/SEO-web, or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/greenhatwebs, plural, WEBS. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Very good.
Thank you.